frontman and Anarchy Reviews. Shameless plug. And I am here with Cortland Hall at the Witch's Dungeon in Bristol, Connecticut. Cortland, say hi to the people.
Hi there, and I'm happy to be here. This is something I've loved doing ever since I was 13 years old, way back in 1966, but don't tell anybody.
Nobody's going to see this anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Well, actually, first of all, kind of wanted to ask you, give us a rundown of what exactly is the Witch's Dungeon.
Well, the Witch's Dungeon is a tribute to the actors and the makeup artists that created the classic horror films. And that's what I've always been interested in since I was a little kid. There's so much more substance to the old horror films, especially the Universals and also the Hammer films, because as Vincent Price said, it's like an overblown fairy tale. You have good versus evil, and good wins in the end. But the characters have so much more substance to them because they are real characters. They're not an aimless killer that's going out trying to strangle or murder people. They're most of them are tortured souls, the characters, and they're based on classic novels like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Phantom of the Opera, like Behind Me by Gaston Leroux, Frankenstein. You know, they're really top-notch classic books that the characters are based upon. So there's more substance to them.
I always thought it was brilliant how Universal kind of picked and choose these classic stories to make them I don't even think they realized what they were doing when they were doing it.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it happened by chance, and then they found out it was very popular, and it became a franchise for them.
Yeah, and to this day, you know, they always talk about rebooting it, and people question it and stuff like that. They've been rebooting these movies since the beginning. I hope that I like to see it done tastefully when they do it.
Well, the problem is, like, let's say, for instance, the most recent Mummy with Tom Cruise. Don't mind if I cringe when I say Tom Cruise.
What the hell?
But they get so far away from the original story of the Mummy, which is about, hello, the mummy. It's not about the archaeologist. It's not about Indiana Jones, pseudo-Indiana Jones, discovering the mummy. It's about the mummy and the intensity of that character.
Yeah, I always felt that the Karras mummy movies with Lon Chaney Jr., when I watched those movies, I felt that those might have actually influenced Indiana Jones because of the archaeology.
Possibly, yeah, because the original Mummy is about Ardith Bey or Imhotep,
Yeah.
which was Boris Karloff. And there's such an intense performance by Boris in that one, especially with his eyes and his mannerisms. And it's amazing how subdued he was as the mummy, because it could very easily be overplayed, but he knew just how to play that, and it worked so well. But I will have to tell you, I still love the Karras Mummy, because that's the only Universal horror film that as a kid scared me. The first one I saw was The Mummy's Ghost, where Karras brings the reincarnated Princess Nanka down into the quicksand, and she keeps aging as he's going down with her. Yeah. Well, that night I had to go out to the kitchen late at night to get something to drink, water or milk or whatever. And our kitchen door had glass windows. I crawled under the kitchen door because I was afraid Karras was going to be there and just go right through the window and get me. So that was the only Universal horror film that scared me. As a matter of fact, the biggest night we ever had at the old place was when Dick Smith decided to come out. And he never did conventions or anything like that, no public appearances. So Dick had known me since I was a teenager, and he lived in Connecticut. So he agreed to come out one night. Oh my God, I've never seen anything like it. Word spread like wildfire, and it was before the internet was big. It was mentioned in USA Today, and we had people coming from as far away as Chicago and Texas and Pittsburgh, you know, all over the place. And I told Dick, when it got to be about 10 o'clock at night, I said, you know, you don't have to stay, because I said, we only said we were going to open 7 to 10. He says, how can I leave? The line is still down to the end of the street.
That's awesome.
So he says, keep the coffee and the donuts coming and I'll stay. And he stayed until 1 a.m.
Wow, that's great.
And he just loved it. He had a great time.
Now, you've had some other guests here through the years, too.
Oh, sure. I mean, we've had Boris Karloff's daughter, Sarah Karloff, Bela Lugosi Jr., even Dwight Fry Jr. came up one time. And, of course, Ron Chaney and Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter, and Victoria is coming back this year on October 21st. So it's, all the families are very supportive of what I've done because they feel I'm keeping the memory of their families, their actor families alive for new generations. And it is very true. We get a lot of young people that really have become very knowledgeable about it because they've seen the DVDs. And so it's nice to see that younger people are showing an interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now you create these pieces.
Yeah.
What got you into creating?
Well, as you know this, but for those folks out there, my great uncle was the actor Henry Hull, who was the first movie werewolf, The Werewolf of London, in 1935. And Henry really was the one that helped me learn how to do this in the right way, because what a lot of people don't know, he was a great makeup artist himself on the stage. And that's why I'm going to dispel that rumor. He did not reject the original Wolfman makeup for vanity purposes or that he couldn't sit in the makeup chair. It was simply because of how the script was written. In the script, 2 of the characters recognize him as being a werewolf, that he was actually Dr. Glendon. And it was the way the script was written that he says, I can't be covered with fur like that. They have to show some semblance of recognizing me or the audience isn't going to buy it. And Jack Pierce didn't agree with that. Jack Pierce was tough to deal with. He really was, the makeup artist. So was Henry. He knew that it was not going to work. So he went over Pierce's head to Carl Laemmle, the head of Universal, and explained the situation. Laemmle sent Pierce a memo, change it, do what Henry said. And Pierce was livid. And that, I think, is how that rumor started, but it was not true. It wasn't for vanity purposes, and certainly wasn't that he couldn't sit in a makeup chair because he did his own makeup. So the real story is, it was just how the script was written, that he wanted the makeup subdued so that they could recognize him when he was the werewolf as being Dr. Glendon. But I got off track. It's because of...
It's all good stuff, though. Go ahead.
But it's because of Henry that I got to meet a lot of the makeup artists when I was a kid. In particular, the first one was John Chambers, who did the makeup in Planet of the Apes. Mm-hmm. And John was so generous. I was such a lucky kid. It's really quite remarkable. It wouldn't happen today. But when my folks took me out there, he told my folks, why don't you go do touristy things, leave Cortland here, and I'll teach them how to make apes. And so he went through the whole process, and anytime I had a question, I could call him, even though I'm in Connecticut and he's out in California, but he would say, just call me if you have a problem and you want some help. And he was always like that. And then eventually I met Dick Smith, and how could you do better? You got 2 Oscar and Emmy winning makeup artists to teach you what to do. So that's how it all began, was because of them. And I was very, very fortunate. So.
Very cool. Now, this, to people who are hearing about the Witch's Dungeon for the first time, this is New England's oldest Halloween attraction.
Well, from what I've heard, the oldest in the country, because nothing was around in 1966. People were bobbing for apples then. I'm not kidding. Halloween was not what it was now. Back then. And there were no haunted attractions, which we're not that. We're a movie museum. We're not a haunted attraction.
It's very good that you said that too, because I think a lot of people watching this, there are people that I've talked to about this in the past, and I don't know if I should bring my kids, and I'm like, trust me, it's
Well,
family friendly.
Let me say, we don't chase people with chainsaws. We let other people do that. So, no, this is basically a tribute, as I say, to the actors and the makeup artists that created the classic horrors. And that's why it's like a wax museum setup. That's really what it is. But beyond that, we have original props and makeups that were given to me by the actors and that worked on these films, or I mean the makeup artists that worked on these films. So you have pieces like the original Metaluna Mutant that was used in This Island Earth, the original prototype of the creature from the Black Lagoon. All the headpieces that we have that were given to me by Dick Smith are the originals that you've seen in the publicity photos with Dick, like the Exorcist head, Little Big Man head of Dustin Hoffman, and many other pieces that he did. Oh, including a Frankenstein headpiece that he did for a promotional photo with Boris Karloff himself for the Saturday Evening Post way back in 1962. Of course, some of these pieces are so old, we've had to do some minor restoration on them, but very carefully, I mean like microscopically, because we don't want to change it in any way. We've just had to preserve it so it lasts for a few more years at least, you know. And how often do you get to see an actual piece that you saw in a movie? I mean, that's what's really great. So if you're watching this, don't think, well, I saw it on video, why should I come see it? You should see it, because it's a whole different thing seeing these pieces in reality, right up close, like I'm looking at you, because it's like almost being there when these films were made. That's the difference. It's something you can't experience on video. You really have to see it in person.
Well, I actually will say that I come here every year. 1 year, the only weekend I was able to come up, I had surgery on Friday, and I was supposed to be in bed for a couple days, and I came here on Saturday because I could not miss it. That's to give you an idea. Not only do you have
well,
to
you're
come out and see it
diligent. I'll
once,
say that. Yes.
like to me, it's just not my favorite holiday without coming here.
Well, that's great to
So
hear.
you know, and to me, like, you know, I think, like, I mean, and this is in Bristol, Connecticut. I mean, this is, I mean, I've lived in 3 different places since I've been coming here. Every one of them is within 15 minutes driving distance from here. And that's centrally located in Connecticut. Probably one of the coolest Halloween exhibits you'll ever see, especially if you're into especially classic horror movies.
Well, it's sort of like 3-4 museums in one, because the main thing is the wax museum set up like when I'm sitting in here with the Phantom of the Opera, and we have tour guides that take you through. Now, I designed it a special way that most of these movies were in black and white, and of course you're seeing them in full color with colored lighting and almost like a Basil Gogos cover of Famous Monsters. Well, I decided the tour guides needed to be totally in black and white, because their costumes, their faces, everything, because they're the only live people in here, and I wanted a contrast between the tour guides and the figures, so that's why they're in black and white and everything else is in color. Now, as I was saying, it's more than just one museum. It is like a wax museum, but we also have, as I mentioned, original movie props and makeups on display that you can see. Plus, in our movie room, we have display cases with movie memorabilia that ranged from the early 1960s right up until the 90s. And some very rare pieces there too. Then, after you've taken the tour, then you come into the movie room and you can watch movies on real film. Real film, not the little silver disc in the machine, but real film. You can actually see movies that way. All night from 7 p.m. up till 10 p.m. when we close. So I think it's quite a good deal. You're getting a lot for an evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you, what is your favorite piece that you've done?
Well, actually, it's this gentleman back here, Lon Chaney Sr. as the Phantom of the Opera and the Red Death. Because when I was a little kid, I was either 7 or 8 years old, and my folks gave me the whole movie on 8mm film. You folks have to realize there was no video back then, so film was film.
I didn't have that one, but I actually had a couple on 8mm.
So this was the whole feature in 8mm. I don't know how many times I ran that. It became my favorite movie, and in more ways than one. That I had a very rare blood condition as a kid, and it's commonly called the kid in the plastic bubble. So I had known Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, and when we were out in California one time with Frear Ackerman, he asked me, he says, "What's your favorite movie?" He says, "I think I know." And I told him Phantom of the Opera. He says, I thought so. And it was because he said, you could relate to the Phantom because of your illness that you've had since you were a kid. And it was sort of like the Phantom that had to seclude himself in the catacombs of the Paris Opera, although he was a brilliant musician, like an artist, and he had to be secluded away from the public, and in your own way, you had to be secluded because of your blood condition. So he was right. I mean, it never occurred to me until he told me that, but that's kind of unique in a way.
It's funny because as a kid, Phantom was my favorite, and I mean, I was a musician, I was a theater kid. I would get made fun of a lot, I get picked on a lot, and I kind of related to that. I needed to stay in my room and listen to my records, and I think that's kind of like we talk about the heart that's in some of these classic movies that the modern movies don't have anymore.
Exactly, you know, because you feel for these characters, because whatever it is that they've experienced, whether it's Professor Jarrett in House of Wax and his dream of this wax museum has been taken away from him by this partner of his that traps him in the wax museum, and he's horribly disfigured, or if it's the Phantom in his condition. So it's a number of different things that in these movies that the main character has suffered in some way that it makes it, you have sympathy for that character. And I think that makes that character more, it means more to you than just a common serial killer.
Yeah. I always kind of like the genius behind, one of the things I consider one of the better movies ever made too would be the original King Kong movie.
Yes, well, we could only get maybe his toe in here.
Yeah. Well, you have you did have the
we do have a replica of the model of Kong, the armature of Kong, which is based on Bob Burns' original. That he has the original, but this was a casting made from that.
Yeah, that's new here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that was like, oh my god, I've been on a King Kong kick for these things. Currently all kinds of Kong anything. So, wow. Now I have to ask you, who is your Dracula?
Well, I have to say, it is a tough decision, but Bela still is always Dracula to me because of he's from that area in reality, Bela was, and he just has that bearing as this undead count. I don't know what it is about him. It's that persona that he projects. Christopher Lee is second to me. I mean, I hate to say that. I mean, I love Christopher Lee, don't get me wrong, but each actor played it differently, which is very good. I mean, Christopher Lee played it in a way that when he was in the throes of wanting the blood, that he was almost animalistic, the way he would jump over tables and things, you know. So they both are wonderful. I really have a hard time saying I like one over the other, but I think because of Bela and his sort of princely-like demeanor, that I just always think of him as Dracula.
I was always also a big Nosferatu fan. I always said Nosferatu made Dracula terrifying.
Well, yeah, as far as that goes, he is the most terrifying, and even to this day, is the most terrifying Dracula. Count Orlok is, yes.
And Bela made him sexy.
Yeah.
And Christopher Lee kind of found that middle.
Yeah, he was a combination of the romantic vampire and also the animalistic,
Yeah.
bloodlusting vampire. Yeah.
I'm still torn when it comes between Bella and Christopher Lee. Actually,
It is tough.
Yeah.
It really is.
It really is tough.
And the funny thing is that Bela, I feel, was even better in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the fact that if you think about that film, he steals the show. I mean, he is the one that makes everything happen in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So he's very powerful in that. It makes you wish, no offense to John Carradine, but it makes you wish that Bela was in House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, because just that scene, like what we've recreated here from House of Frankenstein with Professor Lampini with the skeleton and the stake in his heart. Can you imagine Boris pulling the stake out and it turns into Bela? I mean, my gosh, that would be a magic moment. It really would.
The first time I ever saw House of Frankenstein and they pulled a stake out of his heart and it turns into Carradine's Dracula, the look on my face was like this. I didn't know I'm watching House of Frankenstein without looking at the, the credits or whatever, and it was just kind of like,
You
oh.
expected Bela, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against John Carradine, but I think if we did pull the stake out and turn into John Carradine, he'd start spouting Shakespeare. But
Nothing about him as an actor.
No, he was a wonderful actor. It's just that Bela became the embodiment of Dracula for some reason, and part of it is because he came from that part of the country, Romania area, and he had a legitimate accent. I think that's part of it.
And he was brilliant. I mean,
He really was.
I also say too, one of the things that Bela Lugosi did, a lot of people are criticize his performance as Frankenstein. But
that's not quite fair, because in the previous film, Ghost of Frankenstein, it's Igor's brain that's put in the body of the monster, and they were going to have the monster talk as Igor. That was the whole reason of having Bela play the monster. Halfway through production, they changed their mind and they had the monster silent. So the scenes that were shot where Bela was going around like this, he was supposed to be blind, because at the end of Ghost of Frankenstein, he couldn't see.
that's exactly where I was going with that.
And that's sad that Bela gets criticized for that, because it was Universal's fault, because they changed gears halfway through production.
But what I've seen that everybody that impersonates Frankenstein, they always do the hands up. So
yeah, that's true.
it's a very serious Frankenstein trope that Bela brought to the character that people don't
I
even realize.
suppose, yeah, because when Boris played the monster, he didn't do that, really, and neither did Lon Chaney Jr.
No.
He really didn't either. He was more or less had his hands at his side when he did that. So yeah.
Karloff kind of had it up on Bela for most parts, but when it came to Dracula, I mean, Bela was untouchable. But Karloff as Frankenstein is probably one of the best performances ever.
Absolutely, and as I say, also him as the Mummy too. Those are probably his two very best performances.
And especially when they brought in The Bride of Frankenstein is one of my favorites of all time.
Oh yeah, I love that film. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to add The Bride next year. We already did a very exact replica of one of the laboratory gadgets from Bride of Frankenstein, which I drew it out, but a friend of mine that's a carver, actually he carves carousel horses. And so he carved it, because you can't get insulators this big. And the old insulators that Kenneth Strickfaden used in his stuff, I found color photographs of it, and the insulators are sort of a brownish color, and that's what we did. We painted them to look exactly like the Strickfaden gadgets that he did.
Now, Colin, is everything that you have on display, as far as your pieces that you've made?
You mean as far as life-size figures?
Yes.
Yeah, everything's on display, but I have heads for more.
And is there anything
I have a few heads in the boxes ready to go.
He means created
Yes, I haven't decapitated anybody, but there are a couple of people I wouldn't mind doing that.
Like who? No, I'm just kidding. Now, is there anything that you yearn to do, like that you're like really?
Well, we're already, believe it or not, starting to run out of space. I mean, things are starting to get a little tight even in here, and this is like 5-6 times larger than the original building was. That's why we're hoping to be able to move upstairs permanently, that we could be open all year round, not just seasonally, because this really is a movie museum, and it's not just needed for Halloween. As a matter of fact, I get calls all year round, especially on other holidays, wanting to know if we're open. So it's not just seasonal. It's not just for Halloween. It's as I say, it is legitimately a movie museum. So, you know, if we can get the elevator in the building, that's what we're trying to get, then we can be on the second floor, because it does have to be handicapped accessible. But there's so much more we want to do. I mean, like for instance, we already have the costume for it. I want to do Ming the Merciless and Flash Gordon, the Buster Crabbe,
yes,
Charles Middleton Flash Gordon.
Oh wow! All right.
I want to have Ming facing off with Flash Gordon, and also the Frederick March, Mr. Hyde, and I already have that partially in the works. And as I say, Elsa as the Bride of Frankenstein is partially in the works. And also, the other one that we will probably be adding next year is Warner Oland as Dr. Yogami, with my great uncle as the Werewolf of London, Wilfred Glendon. Because the reason I didn't do it this year, you have to make the figure a certain way that it looks like they're fighting with each other. And I'm going to recreate the last scene in the movie where Warner Oland is fighting with Henry Hull. And of course, it was Warner Oland who bit Henry in the first place in Tibet, and that's what made him become a werewolf. So I guess you can say, technically, Warner Oland was the first movie werewolf, and my uncle was the second, because Warner Oland bit my uncle. So.
Now, what is your thoughts about the use of CGI nowadays in movies?
Well, I think it's kind of sad that it's all gone that way, and I think that's part of the reason why some wonderful makeup artists have kind of retired, because even makeup is being done CGI, like the Disney Beauty and the Beast and other films. See, Dick Smith always told me, when he put a makeup on an actor like Dustin Hoffman, and Dustin Hoffman was a very young man when he played Little Big Man, Jack Crabbe, in that film. And he said once Hoffman saw the makeup on him, he could become that 100-year-old man. It helped him. When he saw it in the mirror, he says, now I know how to play that character. And that, I think, is something you can't do with CGI. There's something that an actor needs as an anchor to hold on to that creates a character. And I think any of these classic characters, it's the makeup that helped the actor become that character.
I always say, as a musician, I don't go crazy. I wear eyeliner on stage with my band, and people will make fun of me for doing it. Oh, I wear makeup. But that was actually, people, like, it's not a gimmick to me. When I was in theater, the first time I ever did a play, well, you have to sit down and do makeup. I'm like, you're not putting makeup on me. And they're like, and I'm like, I don't, like, I had to.
Well, it's because of the lights, and my Uncle Henry always told me this. For stage, it's very different than film, because of the fact that it has to carry several rows back. Mm-hmm. And especially your eyes, you do have to use eye makeup so that it carries several rows back.
Well, to me, once they got the makeup on me, I felt like it was almost like a protection barrier, and I was able to get into my character.
It helps you perform.
Yeah, and so the first time I ever wore it with my band, I was like, I could totally be myself, because I feel like I had my protective coating on.
That's true.
And it was like, so it's like, to me, I know exactly where you're going with that. Like, it does enhance the performance.
It does. It really does.
It's something that, it's definitely a gimmick that the artist can actually work with. So yeah.
And I'm very proud of my great uncle in a number of ways because of the fact that not only was he a very versatile actor, he made over 70 movies, but he was also a really amazing makeup artist. I have photographs he gave me of him on stage as Edgar Allan Poe, and it's the most dead-on example of an actor playing Poe. I just wish there was footage of it because back in those days it was live theater and no footage was ever taken of it. But he not only played Poe as a young man, and then after intermission, during intermission, he changed the makeup to be the Poe that we're normally used to seeing. So that shows what a talented makeup artist he was. Plus, he did his own makeup when he toured as Mark Twain, I might add, before Hal Holbrook. So he was really the first major actor to portray Mark Twain on tour in a one-man show.
Wow.
So, that's why I get a little angry about that stupid rumor about that he refused the makeup for vanity purposes, or he couldn't sit in the makeup chair. It's nonsense. But as Uncle Henry said to me, he says, my boy, Hollywood lives on gossip. And he says, once gossip is printed, everybody assumes it's fact.
The music industry is not too far behind on that. It's really not. It's so not.
But I have to tell you, I question Henry so much on Werewolf of London, because how many kids, I was a teenager, how many kids can say their uncle is a werewolf,
Sure.
So I would ask him the color of the makeup, the color of the costumes, how the effects were done with John Fulton and Jack Pierce working together on the effects, which were really quite amazing for 1935, especially the scene where he walks past those pillars. That was very complicated how they did it, and Henry had a memory like you wouldn't believe. He gave me all the details as to how they went to do that, which involved a combination of rear projection and front mat of the pillars were matted in afterward, and then he was walking on a treadmill.
Oh wow.
So nobody knows this because why? None of these film historians ever questioned Henry about it. Thank God I did, or it would have been lost.
Wow.
But anyway, so Henry got to the point where he said, my dear boy, he says, I did make 70 other pictures. Can we talk about them sometime? He says, you grill me like a cheese sandwich. But he loved it. He loved the fact that his nephew was so interested in his work.
Dude, you're kind of carrying the torch for him now. I mean, everything.
Oh yeah, I like to have his name out there because I think it's important. I mean, with no, I love the Cheney Wolfman because they're two totally different movies, two totally different characters, which is great. That's why I love both of them. And the Cheney character, the Cheney Wolfman, you've got Maliva the Gypsy in that. You've got a lot of different elements going on besides Werewolf of London. You've got the whole sequence in Tibet. You've got the thing with Warner Olin biting him and all this. So they're two totally different animals, if you want to call it that. And that's why I love both films. It's not that I like one better than the other. It's just that, well, he was my great uncle,
You're allowed to be biased.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty much we covered everything. Although I will say, all right, I have to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there is, I know you were friends with Mark Hamill.
Oh, yes.
We ask all our guests this one question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking you this at the end out of respect because it usually turns into a big whatever. Are you, in the realm of Star Wars, are you for or against the prequels?
Well, I like what they've been doing lately. If you mean those three that were in between.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
No. I thought they were just terrible. I'll say this, of those three that came after the first three classics,
Yes.
let's say the first three classics, out of those three, The last one was the best because it had more of the Emperor in it.
Yes.
And he really, he made that last one. So that had some redeeming
and
qualities.
zero pod racing.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's just it's something we kind of joke around about. To me, the Emperor made that movie. That was,
But I have to tell you, Mark loves classic horror films. As a matter of fact,
I know he does.
he watches Svengoolie.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And we've been friends for like 37 years, something like that. And we hardly ever talk about Star Wars. We talk about horror films, we talk about animation. And one time I surprised Mark, it was his birthday, and this was mid-80s, something like that. And I'd known Chuck Jones, who created the Roadrunner and the Coyote, and of course Duck Dodgers and Marvin the Martian. And so I called Chuck and I said, Mark's birthday is coming up. I want to buy something special for him. Do you have a real production cell, not one of those made-up ones, but a real production cell of Marvin with Daffy as Duck Dodgers? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, what would be the chances of me buying it from you? He says, well, I give it to you. So he gave it to me to give to Mark, and he signed it to Mark. Now I said, all right, I got one question to ask you besides that. When I give it to Mark, can I call you and put him on the phone? And he says, I'd love to talk to him. So this was a total surprise to Mark. So Mark was in New York at the time because he was doing Broadway shows at that time. And
Son of any good actor, by the way.
he did a wonderful job on Amadeus and Elephant Man.
Yep.
and several other shows that he did. So anyhow, I go to he has no idea what I'm going to do. So I have it all wrapped up. I give it to him. He's like, oh my God. It was like any fanboy. It's even signed by Chuck Jones. And I said, and it's a real production cell. It's not one of those made up ones. He says, I know, I can tell because, see, Marvin was on one cell and Daffy was on the other. When they make these makeup ones, they're all in one cell. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I said, do you mind if I use your phone? Why would I mind? So I called Chuck and I said, I have someone here that would like to talk to you, Mark. He says, oh, who? I said, Chuck. He says, you mean Chuck Jones? Really? And so I put him on the phone, and it was like just amazing because he never met Chuck before, and he always loved the Warner Brothers cartoons, especially Marvin. So
that's awesome. I was just I was.
So how do you get a present for Mark Hamill?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a tough one to top, but yeah. I was just talking about him yesterday because he autographs cards at conventions, and sometimes when he gets bored, he gets a little silly with them.
Oh, okay.
And there's a picture of Luke when he notices his aunt and uncle are fried to a crisp, and he's looking the look of anger and terror all at once in the shot, and he signed the card. Well, I guess now I get to go to Tashi's station to pick up power converters whenever I want to.
Well, Mark has a great sense of humor.
Yeah,
he really does.
Absolutely. Well, Corlin, I think that's everything.
I hope I didn't talk too long with I thought you might enjoy the Mark Hamill.
That was great. Well, I know the people that do the show are gonna love that one. To me, it's been a thrill to be here. Again, like I said, this is a big part. Great to finally talk to you. I've talked to you at conventions before. Mm-hmm. I've had conversations with you here before, but finally to kind of get inside your head and let the people that follow League of Extraordinary Frontmen to kind of understand what's really going on here. It's been awesome. Probably one of the best interviews I've ever had on the show.
Oh, great.
Again, Corlin Hall. This is The Witch's Dungeon in Bristol, Connecticut. This is Scotty Anarchy from League of Extraordinary Frontmen and Crossing Rubicon. And Jeanne on camera. Thank you guys for tuning in.
And beware of the full moon.
Yes. And to let you know, The Witch's Dungeon is open
Every weekend in October, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. And we're going extended right straight through to Halloween, from that Friday right straight through to Halloween night.
Awesome.
So it'll be every night there. So if you have any questions, this is a terrible plug, www.preservehollywood.org.
That's actually, we call it shameless plugs. That's actually part of the show.
That's shameless.
So that's, well, we plug ourselves.
I'm terribly shameless.
Yeah, you have to be. Well, any artist has to be shameless. And that's the thing, you talk about people coming to see live as musicians, that's what we want too.
Well, people constantly say, well, how can I find out more information? Well, go there. There you go.
Yeah, anything you ever need from the League of Extraordinary Frontmen from now on, we will plug this regularly for you.
Great.
We'll have the video. We'll tag you. We'll tag Preserve Hollywood in there.
Yeah, it helps if you write it on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, we'll do that.
You don't have to tape that.
Right here.
We'll do all that stuff. But again, this is thrilling. I'll probably try to stop down here again between now and the holiday. Again, I can't thank you enough. This is great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Great.